This week on The Inside Story, the White House puts Africa front and center. President Biden welcomes Kenyan President William Ruto to the White House, celebrating 6 decades of partnership. See what it means for the future and how it could affect the ongoing crisis in Haiti. Plus, a look at the U.S. presidential election as both leading candidates court the same growing block of voters. Now, on The Inside Story, Biden's Africa outreach.
Hello and welcome to The Inside Story. I'm VOA White House correspondent Anita Powell. U.S. President Joe Biden welcomed the president of Kenya, William Ruto, to the White House last week. During the visit, Biden announced he would make the East African nation a major non-NATO ally, the first sub-Saharan nation to receive that status. It was an opportunity for the White House to focus on Africa's increasing role on the world stage and promise a more engaged U.S. role in the future. This is no mere handshake.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
This is the start of something much bigger. As President Joe Biden welcomed Kenyan President William Ruto to the White House for the first state visit by an African leader in nearly 16 years, he topped the soft power festivities, which included a lavish state dinner, with something more concrete. Biden announced he'd recognize Kenya as a major non-NATO ally, a status that gives it privileged access to U.S. training and equipment.
That's a fulfillment of years of collaboration. Our joint counterterrorism operations have degraded ISIS and al-Shabaab across East Africa. Our mutual support for Ukraine has rallied the world to stand behind the UN Charter. And our work together on Haiti is helping pave the way to reduce instability and insecurity.
And Ruto reiterated his plea that the U.S. double its commitments to help restructure African nations' debts, most of which are to the world's largest creditor, China.
Unless this is done, and done immediately, the values of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law are in great jeopardy.
Analysts say Kenya's spotty human rights record, as documented by the U.S. State Department, raises concerns about how it will use its new privileged status.
Kenya has serious issues with things like extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances and torture and cruel and inhumane and other forms of degrading punishment by government or on behalf of the government. And this is by the security forces. So there's going to be concerns that that part of the strategy is being abandoned, that the U.S. is no longer putting such a priority on democracy promotion in Africa, and the U.S. is really retrenching towards the security side of the security democracy paradigm.
Ruto also ironed out a number of other agreements during his deliberations in Washington, including Kenya's delayed plans to send 1,000 security officers to the Caribbean nation of Haiti. The initiative, toward which the U.S. has pledged $300 million, faces stiff political and legal challenges in Kenya and has been delayed by political turmoil in Haiti. Ruto, who said he was looking forward to the deployment of forces to Haiti, did not give a date. The day after the state visit, Ruto met with U.S. defense officials to discuss the mission. An advance team from Kenya returned home earlier this week after recommending another delay over logistics issues. The situation in Haiti is growing ever more tense. Earlier this week, mourners thronged a church in the capital to mourn the director of a missionary group and 2 Americans working with the same church. They were all killed in a brazen gang attack that targeted their orphanage. There's been some confusion about why Kenya, half a world away, is engaging in Haiti. Joining President Biden at a news conference at the White House, President Ruto explained Kenya's peacekeeping mission to the Caribbean nation.
Kenya believes that the responsibility of peace and security anywhere in the world, including in Haiti, is the collective responsibility of all nations and all peoples who believe in freedom, self-determination, democracy, and justice. And it is the reason why Kenya took up this responsibility, because we have been participating in peacemaking, and we have been participating in peacekeeping over the last 40 years. in 47 countries, including very difficult neighborhoods like what we're going to face in Haiti. We are going to take up that responsibility alongside the Haiti police, and we have clear modus operandi, how we are going to relate with the situation on the ground that has been agreed under the United Nations framework. So we are looking forward to this deployment because we believe that the women and children in Haiti deserve peace. Kenya's participation in Haiti is not so much about what happened in the past. It's about what we believe in, the peace and security of humanity. And it's the people of Kenya to commit their own troops using their own structures. We've gone through the processes in Kenya. Parliament has approved. We have a clear mandate. We have a clear framework. And it is us, the people of Kenya, who made this decision in the interest of serving peace and stability as a responsible global citizen and understanding that insecurity, instability anywhere is insecurity and instability everywhere.
They're always about more than just the visit. They're a way to signal future policy agreements or highlight crucial differences between world leaders. To get a better understanding of the significance of Ruto's recent visit, I sat down with Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for African Affairs at the National Security Council, Dr. Francis Brown. I want to start with issues of trade and AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunities Act. Obviously, this is going to be a decision made by Congress, but how does the administration feel about the benefits of barrier-free trade with the United States?
Yeah, President Biden has been really vocal that he sees AGOA reauthorization and AGOA modernization as a huge priority. It has been huge, I think, from our perspective, but also from the perspective of the region. It's something we hear a lot about from our Kenyan partners, particularly as regards apparel and AGOA. So we do look to Congress for that, but as you know, AGOA reauthorization is due next year, and obviously, we hope that things can get in motion before then.
I want to ask about PEPFAR, which, of course, for people all around the continent has been a literal lifesaver. This is also up for renewal in 2025. How does the White House see this program as contributing to national security and I guess global well-being, or how would you characterize it?
Absolutely, yeah. We view PEPFAR as essential, and as you know, PEPFAR has been supported to bipartisan congressional support and across administrations. This is a George W. Bush initiative initially. We think PEPFAR is delivering for people across the continent, and we've been proud to support it, and we look for reauthorization.
And then finally, this is a really tough question, but it has to be asked. When is President Biden going to visit Africa, and where will he go?
Yeah, so I cannot make news at this moment by announcing presidential travel, but what I will say is thus far, I think President Biden's commitment to the relationship of the continent is pretty clear. If you think about Kenya, it's the first state visit that we're giving to a non-G20 country this term. There have only been 5 other state visits. Well, that's one piece of evidence. But then you just look at the steady stream of cabinet official travel, senior official travel to the continent over the past 2 years, past year and a half since the Africa Leaders Summit. By our count, there's 24 principals or cabinet level officials who've made that trip, all of them bringing their own agenda. I'd also say, just in terms of the other ways President Biden has shown his commitment, advocating for AU membership at the G20 has been huge, advocating for more African seats at international financial institutions. So there's a lot to point to. While I don't have presidential travel to tell you about right now, you can be sure that when and if we do have something to announce, we would certainly call you in.
I think I'm going to squeeze in one more because you've just joined the NSC in this capacity. This is very exciting. What do what are the priorities that you bring to this post, and what can we look forward to?
Yeah, I think I see this post as moving forward on the affirmative agenda that President Biden laid out, first in the Sub-Saharan Africa strategy, which was published at the end of 2021, then the Africa Leaders Summit, which came at the end of 2022. There were a lot of initiatives launched by those 2 events. Now we are running forward on implementation. At the same time, of course, at the NSC, The urgent sometimes competes with the important, so of course we're seized with managing crises, and we're really sobered by the crises that are happening in many parts of the continent. So I see my role as a balance between those two, and I'm thrilled to be on board.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, two partnerships aimed at financing and manufacturing a new prototype small-scale nuclear reactor are gaining traction. One partner includes a collective of family farmers whose businesses suffer from the country's unreliable power grid. Maurice de Klerk reports from the South African capital, Pretoria.
South Africa's 17-year-long energy shortage makes farmers spend millions supplementing the unreliable national electricity grid with mainly solar power systems or generators running on imported fuel or go bust. Poultry farmers say power outages are bad for their birds and their equipment.
As soon as the power goes out, the fan shuts down and the chickens won't have more than 15 to 30 minutes. As soon as the electricity comes back again, all your appliances get over or under voltage. So we need to replace it every year.
Despite the dire need, generators and solar systems are too expensive for most South Africans to go completely off-grid. Farmers are hoping nuclear power can help. An interest group made up of regional family farmers called the Southern African Agri-Initiative announced a strategic partnership this March with American investment firm C5 Capital to bring a new kind of small nuclear reactor to rural areas.
We can now deliver clean, sustainable energy to these farming communities by using a pebble bed modular nuclear reactor like the HTMR 100. It's extremely safe to operate. It is much cheaper and much smaller than any of the other conventional types of nuclear that we know.
Small modular pebble fuel reactors could allow farmers or other power users to become independent from government-supplied electricity. South African nuclear firm Stratic Global says its HTMR 100 reactor is relatively simple and easy to build.
We decided to develop a small modular reactor that did not need any water and could be taken to where you want the electricity, and it can have its own independent grid of 2 or 5 kilometers in diameter, or it can connect into a national grid.
South Africa was the global leader in pebble bed reactor technology, also known as PBMR, but froze development in 2010. Some South African researchers and engineers established Stratic Global and locally developed the helium gas-cooled pebble fuel reactor, the HTMR 100. South Africa was also the first to commercially manufacture the tennis ball-sized pebbles, enclosing tiny uranium granules that power pebble fuel reactors.
And so South Africa is an ideal country to partner with when it comes to the development of nuclear energy.
Despite the global push towards renewable energy, experts say these technologies can still not continuously power the world's electricity grids.
So that's why there is renewed interest in having nuclear power onto the grid.
Tech advisory firm Koya Capital announced a separate partnership with Stratic Global this April.
We also believe this technology is suitable for applications in Asia, Latin America, and even in traditional markets like Europe and the US, where there is demand for a medium-sized solution.
Stratic Global hopes to start building its first reactor later this year. Marise de Klerk for VOA News, Pretoria, South Africa.
From South Africa, we shift our focus back here for our weekly look at the upcoming November elections. The front-running candidates for the nation's highest office, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, are both courting the U.S. black vote. VOA correspondent Scott Stearns looks at how both campaigns are trying to appeal to this valuable and growing vault of voters.
Donald Trump told voters in New York that all Americans will benefit if he's elected.
It doesn't matter whether you're black or brown or white or whatever the hell color you are, it doesn't matter. We are all Americans, and we're going to pull together as Americans.
Joe Biden told civil rights leaders in Michigan that all Americans are represented in his cabinet.
We have more African Americans. We have more women. We have more minorities in our administration than any other administration in all of history. That's why we're doing so damn well.
Trump and Biden are both campaigning for the support of black voters in an election where that may make the difference in swing states that could decide the outcome. Pew Research data shows the top electoral issues for black Americans in 2024 are improving education and strengthening the economy. Trump says he'll tackle both.
We're going to bring success back to our schools. We're going to bring prosperity back to every neighborhood and every borough of the greatest city in our land.
The Biden campaign's targeting black voters with this ad about Trump in New York.
Of course I hate these people.
Donald Trump disrespecting black folk is nothing new. He was sued for refusing to rent his apartments to black families and called for the execution of 5 innocent black and brown teenagers.
Biden says Trump is a vengeful candidate whose election would hurt minorities.
Trump isn't running to lead America. He's running for revenge. But revenge is no way to lead a country. You can't build a future on revenge. You can't build better lives through revenge. That's why I'm running to lead America into the future.
Immigration is a central theme in Trump's campaign, one he tailored to minority voters in the South Bronx.
African Americans are getting slaughtered. Hispanic Americans are getting slaughtered. And these millions and millions of people that are coming into our country, the biggest impact and the biggest negative impact is against our black population and our Hispanic population, who are losing their jobs, losing their housing, losing everything they can lose.
Biden told black voters he needs them again to beat Trump.
You're the reason Donald Trump is the defeated former president. And you're the reason Donald Trump's going to be a loser again.
4 years ago, black voters chose Biden over Trump by 92%. As of last month, Pew Research data says that's down to 77% of black voters who would vote for or are leaning toward Biden, compared to 18% for Trump. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
Now some good news on health. Life expectancy in Europe returned to pre-pandemic levels this year. The US, meanwhile, is still struggling to regain lost ground. Overall, new numbers show life expectancy increased in most parts of the world, with sub-Saharan Africa showing the biggest gains over the past 3 decades. Henry Ridgewell has the story.
Latest European Union figures released this month show the average life expectancy across the bloc in 2023 was 81.5 years, almost a year's gain over 2022 as the coronavirus pandemic was coming to an end.
Within Europe, we're seeing really high life expectancy in countries like Spain and Italy, Sweden, Norway. But some countries are falling behind their peers, and that includes the UK. And then Eastern Europe has made a lot of progress since the post-Soviet mortality crisis of the 90s, but they're still lagging behind a bit.
A recent study in the Lancet journal showed that globally, life expectancy increased by 6.2 years between 1990 and 2021, with Eastern Sub-Saharan Africa experiencing the largest increase of some 10.7 years.
I think that's really good news and reflects a lot of continued progress all over the world in falls in infectious disease and infant and child mortality, which makes a big difference to life expectancy because you're saving a lot of years of life if you save lives at young ages.
Figures released in March showed average life expectancy in the United States in 2022. The most recent data available was 77.5 years, still more than a year lower than the life expectancy before the pandemic. Figures for 2023 have not yet been released.
A lot of countries have bounced back close to pre-pandemic life expectancy. But some countries, such as the US, have not returned yet to the levels they were at in 2019. But another thing that's having a big impact, we think, right now is the obesity epidemic, which started taking off, especially in the US in the early 1980s. And in fact, we are seeing major slowdowns and improvements from cardiovascular disease that are driving a lot of the stalling life expectancy in high-income countries.
The European Principality of Monaco, a favourite home for the super rich, had the world's highest life expectancy in 2023 at almost 90 years, according to US figures. Henry Ridgewell, VOA News.
Last week, I was lucky enough to have a front row seat to the fabulous fashion at the Kenya State Dinner, where guests pulled from a deep vault of American and African styles to show their support. But this is a universal language, one that in the US has deep roots. Indigenous fashion designers recently gathered to celebrate couture and creativity at the first ever Native Fashion Week. Gustavo Martinez Contreras has this story from Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Nodding to the past and embracing the future, indigenous fashionistas took over Santa Fe to show the patterns of history during the first ever Native Fashion Week. Indigenous fashion is a staple of the city's yearly Indian market, but show creator Amber Dawn Bearrobe said it was time for a standalone event to showcase the talent of indigenous designers and highlight the continent's original inhabitants.
Contemporary indigenous artists in fashion don't get the recognition or the footprint or the representation that it needs to have, especially considering the history of Native North American art, design, culture, and the history of what we now call Canada, the United States. So the representation of indigenous arts in all of its facets needs a larger, wider footprint that does not exist.
Designer Himikala's Pam Baker's ancestral roots hail from the First Nations of Canada, Squamish, Kwakwaka'wakw, and Tlingit. She has seen the indigenous fashion scene grow from small gatherings decades ago to shows like this that feature the diversity of the Native experience.
I think every designer you talk to, their pieces all tell a story of their history. So coming together, showing myself from the Northwest Coast, then you have somebody from Toronto, then you have somebody from all over Turtle Island. It's going to be a great recognition of the indigenous art from Turtle Island, North America.
Designers did not shy away from social statements. The crowd gave a standing ovation to what Diné designer Carrie Wood called a solidarity look, showing a blend between Diné and Palestinian traditions as model Edwin Felter played a song in his native Tewa language.
By weaving together our two cultures through our clothing, I wanted to show how similar we are in what's happening right now. Because from the way I see it, what's happening now in Palestine is what happened here in the US to indigenous people.
This celebration of indigenous artistry also drew movie stars. Hollywood actor Wes Studi said he never imagined this could happen.
If you had asked me if there was going to be a fashion week of Native American fashion even 15 years ago, I would have said, you're crazy. But, here it has come about, simply because natives have started putting their heart, their integrity, their dreams, and their visions out there for the public to see. So we are no longer the invisible race of noble red men, if you will.
In addition to this show, organizers say indigenous designers will continue to join the yearly Indian market to give Native American fashion and models broader platforms. Gustavo Martinez Contreras, VOA News, Santa Fe.
That's all for now. Thanks for watching. For the latest news, you can log on to voanews.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News. To get all this and your press freedom related content, follow me on X at 6ArmsPowell. See you next week for the Inside Story.